Okay, so here we are, Mountain City Ranger District, Simplot Grazing Allotment. This fence, inside the fence, is a Mountain City drinking water supply. This exclosure is supposed to protect the water supply for the town of Mountain City. Of course, the Simplot cows have been in here. You can see the trampling, there's manure. We're going to go on up the hill where there's a side hill spring just outside the exclosure, partially extending into the exclosure that they've just turned to a muck and manure brine. The ooze from that spring is spilling down into the exclosure, and the bacteria concentrating in the soil and in the waters inside the area that's supposed to be protected for drinking water. Again, these are Simplot cows. This exclosure was not maintained. I complained about it after seeing the wires down in many places to the Forest Service, and was told that, well, Simplot contends that it's not their responsibility to maintain it, even though Simplot cows are grazed all around it. The world's largest public lands grazing permittee, part of a billionaire ag conglomerate cow operation, couldn't come out and maintain a couple acre, if it's that, exclosure fence. It's like there's been, of course, a concentration of cow use outside the fence, which typically happens when you put up a fence and there's water anywhere nearby. The cows beat to death any of the unprotected wet area. Yeah, this is the Humboldt-Toiyabe Forest, and they don't have any trampling standards on their grazing permits for livestock grazing, even though a very significant amount of damage, perhaps the greatest amount of damage done to the riparian areas by grazing 800,000-pound, equivalent to half-ton cows out here, is trampling the spring, seep, and stream-side soils, resulting in these conditions that then help dry out the area, make it more susceptible to erosion. And of course, down on the drainage, head cutting, entrenchment, dropping of water table, all those kinds of things. Here we are at the spring up above the exclosure. It looks like long ago, perhaps, a little trail was bladed into the side hill. And then, of course, in places, the spring vegetation regrew and reoccupied some of the area. The spring is continuous inside the exclosure, and that water up there, the brown, trampled mud brine, spills into the exclosure. Okay, Simplot Miller Creek Allotment. Here's another site where salt or supplement has been placed. Big area, beat to death from placing salt and supplement and having far too many cows out here in the past. 700 cow-calf pairs grazed, an astronomical number for this relatively high elevation sagebrush country. But not being content with wiping out the sagebrush, the grass, and everything else here, Simplot cowboys have placed salt or supplement in intact, undisturbed sagebrush, critical to sage-grouse and other wildlife that depend on it, and destroyed the plants, killed them, so that it's going to be many, many decades. When you look at how old this sagebrush is here for mountain big sagebrush, this is some really tall mountain big sagebrush. We're talking many decades, much longer than probably the 30 or 40 years, cited for recovery of mountain big sagebrush. Probably 100 years or more until this returns to anything like what is in its surroundings. Simplot Miller Creek Allotment, headwater spring of a tributary drainage to the Reed Creek watershed. It's been dug out to form a deep cow pond, completely altering the hydrology of the drainage further downstream. But as we go down the drainage, we'll be able to see that the drainage has been so degraded by livestock that the whole potential to produce riparian vegetation in some areas and have beaver ponds like used to exist in the past, there's evidence of that, has been destroyed by the grazing. Surrounding it, we just have pretty much a Dust Bowl wasteland. Here we are below the dugout headwater spring in the tributary to Reed Creek, looking at a severely trampled and degraded remainder of what used to be a beaver pond complex and spring stream system here. This whole area should be teeming with Columbia spotted frogs. And red band trout should be occupying all of these watersheds. Here we are walking further down the watershed in the shade of the aspen where the cows love to loaf. This is a condition of the spring, the tributary springs, trampled to a muddy mire, devoid of even any vegetation along the banks. And in fact, this whole area should be wet. Instead, it's being incrementally dried out from the chronic degradation of the livestock trampling, of which the Humboldt-Toiyabe Forest has no trampling standards for spring seeps or streams. And in the series of rubber stamp rangeland EISs it is producing, ignores putting any trampling standards on the drainages too. Further down the drainage, condition of the side springs and seeps and the wetlands. These are aspen roots. The cows are digging down and apparently eating the aspen roots or something here. After the cows killed the potential for beaver ponds in the side drainage, we're now down in the main drainage, where with more water, more vegetation remaining, old willows that haven't yet been killed out. But what has happened is almost all the aspen anywhere near the water has been reduced, no longer exists. Beavers have cut down the older aspen, and the cows are keeping the aspen from regenerating, along with the willows. Look at this remnant older willow. This whole area used to be soggy and wet. It's been dried out from that trampling and intensive grazing impacts that we've been seeing all along, and being converted to what it can only be described as a weed land. Right here, the margin of the beaver pond. What do we have? Knotweed, a polygonum. All this vegetation out here in the water, this should be 2 or 3 feet high. Instead, the cows have been out wading up to their bellies, eating nearly every bit of it that they can get to. And there's still cows in here. September, what are we, 15th? Well, here we are in the remains of a dying aspen grove. The beavers have cut down some of the older aspen, as they've done for hundreds of thousands, millions of years. There should be young aspen regenerating from the clone. Unfortunately, the Simplot cattle herd also likes to dine on aspen. This is the aspen regeneration. There is none, essentially, because of the severe impacts of the Simplot cows. Well, we should be walking through head-high riparian vegetation. Nettle, goldenrod, the hellebore that the cows don't eat except on occasion, and they do break down. But this is the height of the stinging nettle that should be here. The cows have eaten stinging nettle out down to 1 or 2 inches of height across the area, and it's like 6 feet tall. It's a vegetation that should be here.